They said purebloods were extinct. They lied. The night smelled like iron and jasmine, a dangerous combination that made wolves uneasy and humans run. 17-year-old Abigail pressed her spine against the cold stone wall of the servants' quarters, fingers trembling as she wrapped the silver-threaded cloth tighter around her wrists. The fabric burned.
Good.
Pain kept the other thing quiet. The thing that lived beneath her skin, coiling and waiting like a serpent made of moonlight. She couldn't let it out. Not tonight. Not ever. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing where my pack is tuning in. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button. This story, it's going to wreck you in the best way. Trust me, you'll want to be here for every twist, every heartbreak, every moment of fire. Now, let's dive in. The Blood Moon Festival had begun 3 hours ago, and Abigail could hear it even from the forgotten corner of the palace grounds where servants like her were meant to remain invisible. Drums thundered. Wolves howled. The ancient ritual had commenced, the one night every year when every wolf in the kingdom was required to shift, to show their true nature beneath the goddess's crimson gaze. Every wolf except her, because Abigail wasn't allowed to shift. She wasn't allowed to exist. Her fingers found the edge of the iron collar hidden beneath her threadbare scarf. Cold, unforgiving, etched with runes older than the kingdom itself. The collar had been clamped around her neck the day she turned 13, the day her scent first began to change, to ripen into something that made alpha wolves stop mid-step and turn toward her like flowers seeking sun. Dangerous, the keeper had whispered. You are too dangerous to be free. Abigail didn't feel dangerous. She felt like a lie wrapped in skin, a secret the kingdom had tried to bury and failed. She was 17 now. 4 years of hiding. For years of swallowing the fire that wanted to burn through her veins. For years of pretending she was nothing, no one, just another nameless servant girl who scrubbed floors and kept her eyes down. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, her skin felt too tight. Her bones ached with a pressure she'd never experienced. And the silver-white flames, the ones she'd learned to smother since childhood, were crackling beneath her ribs like a wildfire that had finally found oxygen.
No.
Not tonight. Please, not tonight. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to summon the meditation techniques the keeper had drilled into her.
Breathe. Count. Suppress.
Survive. But then the wind shifted, and she smelled him. Cedarwood and winter storms. Dominance and something wild, something untamed that made every cell in her body snap to attention. The scent crashed into her like a physical blow, and Abigail gasped, doubling over as heat exploded through her core.
No. No.
This couldn't be happening. Not this. Not the one thing she'd been warned about since she was old enough to understand words. If you ever catch the scent of your mate, you run. You run, and you never look back. Because a bond will destroy you faster than any execution. But her body wasn't listening to logic. Her wolf, the one she'd caged for years, the one that wasn't supposed to be this strong, was clawing at her insides, howling, demanding she follow that scent.
Mate. Mate. Mate.
Stop it. Abigail hissed through clenched teeth, slamming her fist against the wall hard enough to split skin.
Pain.
She needed pain to ground herself, to remind her body that she was not allowed to want, to need, to. A roar split the night. Not a human sound, not even a normal wolf sound. This was primal, ancient, a command that made every creature within a mile radius freeze and submit. The drums stopped. The howling ceased. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Abigail's head snapped up, her silver eyes wide. The arena. Something had happened in the arena. Her feet were moving before her brain caught up, carrying her through the shadows toward the massive stone coliseum at the heart of the palace grounds. She knew better. She knew better than to go anywhere near the festival, near the gathered packs, near the royals. But that scent, that impossible, devastating scent was pulling her forward like a fish on a hook, and she couldn't stop, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but follow. She reached the outer wall of the arena and scaled it with inhuman speed, her fingers finding holds that shouldn't exist, her body moving with a grace that would have given her away to anyone paying attention. But no one was paying attention to the shadows. Everyone was staring at the center of the arena. At him. Prince Arthur. Abigail's breath caught. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone had seen the crown prince, the kingdom's golden heir. The Alpha, they said, was blessed by the moon goddess herself. He was everything the stories promised, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes like molten amber that could make warriors confess their sins with a single look. But she'd never been close to him, never smelled him, never felt the way his presence could rewrite gravity itself. And right now, Prince Arthur looked like a man standing on the edge of violence. He stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists. His formal ceremonial robes were torn at the shoulder, revealing the black tribal marks of the royal bloodline that spiraled across his skin. His wolf was close to the surface, too close. She could see it in the way his eyes flickered between human amber and animal gold, in the way his muscles trembled with the effort of maintaining control. And he was staring at the eastern entrance of the arena, like he wanted to tear through stone and flesh to reach whatever lay beyond it. Arthur. The king's voice cut through the tension like a blade. King Roman sat on the royal dais, his expression carved from ice. Explain yourself. The prince didn't answer. He didn't even look at his father. His entire body was angled toward that entrance, toward the shadows where... Oh no! Abigail's blood turned to frost. He was angled toward her, toward the outer wall where she crouched in darkness, her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. She hadn't even realized she'd gotten this close, that she'd positioned herself directly in his line of sight. And Prince Arthur was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. His lips moved, forming words too quiet for the crowd to hear, but that slammed into Abigail's consciousness like a thunderclap. Where are you? Her wolf screamed. Her power surged, and the silver-threaded cloth around her wrists ignited.
No.
Abigail bit down on her tongue hard enough to taste copper, trying desperately to shove the power back down, to smother the flames, to hide. But it was too late. The iron collar around her neck cracked. Not broke. Not yet. But cracked, a hairline fracture that released the tiniest wisp of her true scent into the night air. And in the arena, Prince Arthur's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto hers across the impossible distance. And the entire world stopped. Mate, his wolf snarled, loud enough that Abigail swore she could hear it in her mind.
Mine. No.
This wasn't possible. This wasn't. The prince moved. One moment, he was standing in the center of the arena. The next, he was gone, moving with speed that defied physics, heading straight for her. Abigail didn't think.
She ran.
She dropped from the wall and bolted into the shadows, her heart in her throat, terror and something else, something hot and wanting and wrong, flooding her system. Behind her, she heard shouting. The king's voice, razor-sharp with command. Guards mobilizing. The entire festival descending into chaos. But louder than all of it was the sound of the prince hunting her. Not chasing.
Hunting.
And as Abigail fled through the moonlit grounds, her collar burning against her skin, and her power threatening to explode, one truth crystallized in her mind. Her life as a shadow was over. The Pureblood Omega had been found, and the Alpha Prince would burn down his own kingdom to claim her. What did you think? Drop a comment and let me know if you're Team Arthur already, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to get wild. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when these two finally come face to face. Abigail didn't stop running until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. She'd crossed half the palace grounds, vaulted over 3 garden walls, and dove through a servant's entrance that led into the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the castle, passages so old and forgotten that even most of the staff didn't know they existed. But she knew. She'd spent 4 years memorizing every shadow, every hiding place, every route that could keep her invisible when the world got too dangerous. And right now, with her collar fractured and her scent bleeding into the air like a beacon, dangerous didn't even begin to cover it. Her back hit the cold stone wall of a storage chamber deep underground, and she finally let herself collapse, gasping for air. The silver-threaded cloth had burned away completely, leaving angry red marks across her wrists. Her whole body trembled, from exertion, from terror, from the way her wolf was still howling for her to go back, to find him, to stop.
Stop thinking about him.
But she could still smell cedarwood and winter storms, as if the prince's scent had branded itself into her memory. Could still see those molten amber eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her feel naked, exposed, seen in a way no one had ever seen her. "Pull yourself together," Abigail whispered harshly, pressing her palms against her eyes. "You're not some love-struck fool. You're a survivor. You've survived this long. You can." "Abigail." She jerked upright, her heart leaping into her throat. A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Tall, elderly, wrapped in the dark robes of the castle's senior staff. Mara, the keeper. The only person in the entire kingdom who knew what Abigail truly was, because Mara had been the one tasked with hiding her since birth. "Mara, Abigail started, but the older woman held up a hand. "I know." Mara's voice was grave, her weathered face tight with worry. "The entire castle knows. The prince went feral in the arena. He tore through 6 guards trying to reach you before the king's command finally stopped him." She moved closer, her sharp eyes scanning Abigail's face, her fractured collar. "Your scent was released. Not much, but enough. Enough for him to catch it." Abigail's stomach dropped. "How bad is it?" "Bad." Mara reached out, her fingers ghosting over the crack in the iron collar. "The king has sealed the arena. No one in or out until they determine what caused the crown prince's episode. But they're asking questions, Abigail. They're asking what could make an alpha of royal blood lose control like that. They'll figure it out." Abigail's voice cracked. "They'll realize it was me. They'll execute you." Mara's words were blunt, brutal. "A pureblood Omega is too powerful to be allowed to live freely. You know this. I've told you since you were a child. The old laws are clear. Purebloods are to be destroyed on sight, because a single one of you could shift the balance of power across all werewolf territories." Abigail had heard this speech 1,000 times, had lived with this truth carved into her bones. Purebloods weren't just rare, they were extinct, wiped out 3 centuries ago in a purge so complete that most wolves now believed they were nothing but legend. Except Abigail wasn't legend. She was real, and very, very illegal. "The collar needs to be repaired," Mara continued, her fingers tracing the runes. "But I don't have the materials here. We'll need to get you to the vault beneath the east wing, where—" A sound echoed through the tunnels, distant but growing closer. Footsteps. Heavy. Purposeful. Hunting. Abigail's blood turned to ice. "Mara. Go." The keeper shoved her toward a side passage. "Follow the tunnel to the old wine cellar. There's a hidden door behind the 3rd barrel on the left. It leads to the forest. You can." "I'm not leaving you." Abigail grabbed Mara's arm. "If they find you helping me, I've been helping you for 17 years, child." Mara's smile was sad but fierce. "I'm not about to stop now."
"Go."
"I'll buy you time." The footsteps were closer now, and beneath them, Abigail heard something else. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the stone itself. Her wolf responded instantly, a desperate keen of recognition and want that nearly brought Abigail to her knees. "He's coming. He's hunting us. He won't stop. Abigail, please." But Abigail was already moving, her survival instincts finally overriding the insane pull toward the prince. She dove into the side passage, her bare feet silent against the stone, her heart hammering as she navigated the twisting tunnels by memory and touch. Behind her, she heard Mara's voice ring out, sharp and authoritative. "Who goes there?" "These passages are restricted." Then nothing but the sound of her own ragged breathing and the growing certainty that running wouldn't save her. Nothing would save her, because Prince Arthur had caught her scent, and an alpha didn't stop hunting until he'd claimed his mate, even if claiming her meant his own destruction. Meanwhile, in the arena, Prince Arthur's fingers dug into the stone pillar hard enough to crack it.
Control.
Maintain control. But control was a joke when every instinct in his body was screaming at him to tear through the castle, to find the source of that impossible scent, to claim what his wolf had recognized instantly as theirs. His mate. His mate. After 23 years of waiting, of enduring the pitying looks from his father and the council members who worried the crown prince would never find his bond, she had appeared. Not just appeared, erupted into his consciousness like lightning striking dry wood, and then vanished. Arthur. His father's voice cut through the red haze. King Roman descended from the dais, his expression unreadable but his alpha dominance radiating outward in waves that would have forced any other wolf to their knees. "Explain what happened." Arthur forced himself to straighten, to meet his father's gaze, even though every fiber of his being wanted to resume the hunt. "My mate." The words came out rough, barely human. "I caught her scent." The king's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. We screened every unmated female in the kingdom. You've been introduced to all of them. If your mate was among them." "She wasn't at the introductions." Arthur's jaw clenched. "She was in the shadows. Hiding." Why was she hiding? Her scent was different. Powerful. Unlike anything I've. "Your Majesty." Elder Theo stepped forward from the council section, his ancient face grave. At 73, Theo was the oldest wolf in the kingdom, his knowledge of pack law and history unmatched. "May I speak?" The king gestured curtly. Theo's gaze moved to Arthur, and something flickered in those old eyes. Recognition.
And fear.
"You said her scent was powerful. How powerful?" "Like..." Arthur struggled for words. "Like moonlight given form. Silver and white fire. Ancient. It made my wolf bow before I even saw her." The silence that followed was deafening. Several council members exchanged looks. Elder Theo's face had gone pale. "That's not possible," someone whispered. "What?" Arthur's patience was fraying. "What aren't you telling me?" The king and Theo shared a long look, an entire conversation passing between them in seconds. Finally, Roman spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "The scent you describe matches accounts from the old texts. Descriptions of..." He paused. "Purebloods." The arena went still. "Purebloods are extinct," Councilwoman Nora said firmly. "They were eliminated during the purge. This is documented fact." "Documented." Theo agreed quietly. "But not necessarily accurate." He turned to the king. "Your Majesty, if I may speak freely." "You may not." Roman's tone brooked no argument. "We will discuss this in private council. As for you," his gaze locked onto Arthur, "you will retire to your quarters and calm yourself. That is an order, not a request." Every instinct in Arthur rebelled. "Father, my mate is out there. If she is your mate, she will be found." The king's voice hardened. "But you will not tear through this castle like a rabid beast. You are the crown prince. You will behave as such." The alpha command wrapped around Arthur like chains, forcing his wolf down, forcing his body to still. He hated it. Hated the power his father held over him. Hated that duty and protocol were keeping him from the one thing that mattered. But he forced himself to nod. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." Roman gestured to the guards. "Liam, Aaron, escort the prince to his chambers. And post sentries. No one enters or leaves without my permission." As guards fell into formation around him, Arthur cast one last look toward the eastern wall, toward the shadows where he'd seen her. "I will find you," He swore silently. No matter what they say, no matter what you are, I will find you. And I will never let you go. By the time Abigail reached the wine cellar, her collar was burning. Not the comforting cold burn of the iron, but a searing heat that meant the fracture was widening, that the suppression runes were failing. She could feel her power rising, that silver-white fire building beneath her skin like pressure in a sealed vessel. She found the third barrel, shoved it aside with strength that should have been impossible for someone her size, and located the hidden door Mara had described. It opened onto a narrow passageway that sloped upward, the air growing fresher, touched with pine and night-blooming jasmine. The forest. Freedom. She could run, disappear into the wilderness, find a way to survive on the outskirts of pack territory where no one would recognize her, where she could live alone forever. Never knowing comfort or connection. Always hiding. Always afraid. Abigail, as hands curled into fists. Was that what she wanted? To spend her life running, suppressing who she was, denying the power that thrummed through her veins? And what about him? The thought came unbidden, unwanted. The image of Prince Arthur's eyes locking onto hers, the way his wolf had called to hers across the impossible distance. The mate bond was supposed to be sacred, unbreakable, the moon goddess's greatest gift to her children. But for Abigail, it was a curse. Because loving her would destroy him. Being with her would cost him everything, his crown, his kingdom, possibly his life. And she refused to be the reason a good man fell. Then don't be weak, a voice whispered in her mind. Not her wolf. Something older, something that had always lived in the deepest parts of her consciousness. You're not just an Omega, little one. You're what they fear, what they hunted to extinction. If you're going to survive, you need to stop hiding and start becoming. I don't know how, Abigail whispered to the darkness. Then learn.
Or die.
The collar flared white-hot. Abigail gasped, her hands flying to her neck as the iron seared her skin. The runes were destabilizing completely now, unable to contain the power that her encounter with her mate had awakened. She had minutes, maybe less, before the collar shattered entirely and her full aura was released. And when that happened, every wolf within 10 miles would feel it, including the prince. Abigail made her decision. She turned away from the forest passage and headed back into the tunnels, moving with purpose now. If her collar was going to break, she needed to be somewhere isolated, somewhere the blast wouldn't immediately give away her location. The old chapel. It was on the far western edge of the castle grounds, abandoned decades ago when the new temple was built. No one went there anymore. The wards carved into its stones were ancient, designed to contain power during the old ceremonies. If she was lucky, they'd be strong enough to muffle her release. If she wasn't,
well,
at least she'd go down fighting. Don't forget to drop a comment letting me know what you think so far, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Things are about to get intense. The old chapel stood like a forgotten sentinel against the night sky, its spire crumbling and its stained glass windows long since shattered. Abigail slipped through the broken door, her breath misting in the cold air, her entire body trembling with the effort of holding her power inside. The interior was exactly as she remembered from the one time Mara had brought her here years ago. Rows of rotting pews, an altar covered in dust, and walls carved with protective runes that still glowed faintly with residual magic. The wards were active if weakened. It would have to be enough. Abigail positioned herself in the center of the chapel, directly beneath the spot where the roof had caved in, leaving the space open to the blood-red moon above. Her collar was vibrating now, the iron screaming as it tried to contain what could no longer be contained. Okay, she whispered to herself, to her wolf, to the ancient power stirring in her bones. If we're doing this, let's do it right. On our terms, not theirs. She reached up and gripped the collar with both hands. The iron burned.
She pulled anyway.
And the world exploded into silver fire. The blast could be felt across the entire kingdom. In his chambers, Prince Arthur was pacing like a caged animal when the shockwave hit. It wasn't physical, not exactly. It was spiritual, Primal, a wave of pure dominance that slammed into every wolf consciousness within range and forced them to acknowledge. Omega. Pure blood.
Mine.
Author S. Wolf roared and took control before he could stop it. His body shifted mid-stride, bones cracking and reforming, dark fur erupting across his skin as his human form gave way to something larger, more powerful. His ceremonial robes shredded. His rational mind drowned beneath instinct.
Mate. Find. Claim. Protect.
He crashed through the window in a shower of glass and dropped 3 stories to the ground below, landing in a crouch before launching into a dead run. Behind him, he heard shouting. Guards, sentries, probably his father's voice commanding him to stop. He didn't care. His mate was calling, and nothing in this world or the next would keep him from answering. In the council chamber, King Roman shot to his feet as the shockwave passed through the room, making the ancient tapestries shudder and the candle flames flicker wildly. What in the goddess's name? Councilwoman Nora started. A pureblood. Elder Theo's voice was hollow. A true pureblood. The power signature is unmistakable. That's impossible. Roman's hands clenched into fists. We eliminated every bloodline. Every single one. The records were clearly incomplete. Theo's gaze was distant, his senses tracking the source of the blast. Someone survived. Someone has been hiding among us for years. He turned to the king. And your son has bonded with her. The implications crashed down like an Abigail launch. A pureblood Omega bound to the crown prince. A power that could reshape kingdoms in the hands of the future king. A violation of every law written in the aftermath of the purge. And a political nightmare that would tear the werewolf world apart. Find her, Roman commanded, his voice like iron. Deploy every Abigail Eilable guard. I want her located and contained within the hour. And the prince? Councilwoman Nora asked carefully. The king's expression was stone. If he interferes, restrain him. This is bigger than a mate bond. This is about the survival of our kingdom. But even as the guards mobilized and the orders went out, Elder Theo remained still, his ancient eyes troubled. Because he alone remembered the old prophecies. The ones that spoke of the return of the purebloods. The ones that promised either salvation or annihilation for all wolfkind. And the ones that said the moon goddess herself would choose which path they walked. Back in the chapel, Abigail was floating. No, not floating. Burning. Her entire body had become a conduit for power so vast and ancient that she couldn't comprehend it, could only surrender to it and pray she survived. The silver-white flames had consumed the chapel, turning the space into a pillar of light that stretched toward the heavens. And in the heart of that light, she was changing, not shifting into her wolf form. That would come later. This was something else, something fundamental. Every cell in her body was being rewritten, every suppressed instinct unleashed, every hidden truth of her bloodline rising to the surface. She saw flashes of memory that weren't hers. Women with silver eyes standing before armies. A throne room where an Omega sat as queen, with alphas kneeling at her feet. A battlefield where a single pureblood's command stopped a war. And beneath it all, a voice, ancient, feminine, infinite. You are the last daughter of the old blood. The kingdoms tried to erase you because they feared what you represent. An Omega who does not submit, who does not serve, who rules by the power of her own will. You are not weak, little wolf. You are the storm they tried to cage. And tonight you fly free. The collar shattered completely, fragments of iron and runic magic scattering like ashes. And Abigail's true aura was released. Author reached the chapel just as the light peaked. Even in wolf form, the sight nearly drove him to his knees. The entire structure was engulfed in silver flames that didn't burn the stone but illuminated it, made it glow like it was carved from starlight itself. And at the center, barely visible through the brilliance, was a figure. Her. His wolf whined, torn between the instinct to rush forward and the recognition that approaching that power carelessly would be fatal. So he shifted back to human form, ignoring his nakedness, his eyes never leaving the chapel as he moved forward step by careful step. "Please," he called out, his voice rough. "Please don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I swear on my life I won't." The flames parted, and Abigail stepped through. Author forgot how to breathe. There were no words. Her hair had turned pure white, falling in waves down her back. Her eyes glowed silver, lit from within by power that made the air itself shimmer. Her skin seemed to radiate moonlight, and around her, the flames moved like living things, like they were extensions of her will. But beneath the power, beneath the otherworldly beauty, Author saw what mattered most. Her fear. She was trembling. Tears streaked her face. And her voice, when she spoke, was small and broken. "Stay back. Please. I can't control this. I don't want to hurt anyone." Everything in Author went soft. His wolf, who moments ago had been a creature of pure dominance and possession, quieted completely. Because this wasn't a situation that required strength or force. This required exactly what his mate needed most. Gentleness. "You won't hurt me," he said, his voice low and sure. "You couldn't if you tried. We're mates. Bonds like ours, they don't allow harm between partners." "You don't understand." Abigail's hands curled into fists, the flames responding to her distress by flaring brighter. "I'm not supposed to exist. They'll kill me. And anyone who protects me, including you. Let them try." The absolute certainty in his words made her eyes snap to his. Author took another step forward, close enough now that the silver flames licked at his skin. They didn't burn. They felt like coming home. "I've waited my entire life for you. 23 years of wondering if I'd even have a mate, if the goddess had forgotten me. And now you're here, and you're magnificent, and you think I'd ever let them touch you." "You're the crown prince," Abigail whispered. "You have responsibilities. A kingdom to lead. You can't." "I can." Another step. He was inside the flames now, surrounded by her power, and it felt like being wrapped in moonlight. "I will. There is nothing more important than you. Not the crown. Not the kingdom.
Not even my own life."
"You don't know me. Then let me." He stopped an arm's length away, his amber eyes locked on hers. "Tell me your name. Let me start there." She was crying now, silent tears cutting through the silver glow on her cheeks. "Abigail. My name is Abigail. Abigail." He said it like a prayer, like a vow. "I'm Author. And I'm yours. From this moment until my last breath and beyond."
"I'm yours."
The bond between them snapped into place. It wasn't gentle. It was violent and absolute, a golden thread of fate and power wrapping around both their souls and binding them so completely that Abigail gasped, her knees buckling. Author caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her as the silver flames surged one final time and then absorbed into her skin, drawn inward until only a faint glow remained in her eyes. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair, breathing in jasmine and moonlight. "I've got you, Abigail. And I'm never letting go." For a moment, just a moment, Abigail let herself believe it. Let herself sink into his warmth, into the impossible comfort of being held by someone who looked at her like she was precious instead of dangerous. But reality came crashing back in the form of howls in the distance.
"Guards."
Dozens of them, converging on the chapel. Abigail pulled back, panic flooding her eyes. "They're coming. Author, you have to." "We run." His decision was instant, absolute. "We run, and we figure out the rest later. If you run with me, you'll be branded a traitor. You'll lose everything. I'll lose you if I don't." His hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "The crown means nothing without you. The kingdom means nothing. Let them call me traitor. Let them come. I'll fight every wolf in this territory to keep you safe." Abigail stared at him, At this prince who was willing to throw away his entire life for a girl he'd just met, and something cracked open in her chest. Maybe she didn't have to run alone anymore. Okay, she whispered. Okay, but we need to go.
Now.
Arthur grinned, wild and fierce and completely unafraid. Then let's give them a chase they'll never forget. He shifted in a blur of motion, his massive black wolf form appearing where the man had stood. He was huge, easily twice the size of a normal alpha, with amber eyes that glowed in the darkness. He knelt, a clear invitation. Abigail had never ridden a wolf before, had never even shifted into her own wolf form without the collar's suppression. But she climbed onto his back, her fingers tangling in his dark fur, and felt right settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be, with him, running toward the unknown. Together. Arthur howled, not a cry of submission but a declaration of war, and launched into motion, carrying his mate toward the forest and freedom, while behind them, the kingdom erupted into chaos. The Alpha Prince had chosen his Omega over his crown, and the world would never be the same. Comment below. Are you Team Arthur yet? Because I'm obsessed. And hit subscribe. You need to see where this goes next. They ran until dawn. Arthur pushed through the forest at speeds that blurred the trees into shadows, his wolf form tireless and powerful. Abigail clung to his back, her fingers buried in his fur, her heart still racing from everything that had happened. Every so often, he'd slow just enough to check on her, his amber eyes meeting hers in silent question. Are you okay? And every time, she'd nod, even though she wasn't sure okay was something she'd ever be again. By the time the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, they'd crossed 2 territorial boundaries and reached the edge of the shadow pine forest, a stretch of wilderness so dense and untamed that even experienced trackers avoided it. Perfect for hiding. Arthur shifted back to human form as they entered a small clearing near a stream. Abigail slid off his back and immediately looked away, her cheeks flushing as she realized he was still very much naked. Sorry, Arthur said, sounding amused despite everything. Shifting tends to destroy clothing. I'll find something to. Here. Abigail shrugged out of the oversized servant's cloak she'd been wearing and held it out without looking at him. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. He took it, and she heard fabric rustling as he wrapped it around his waist. You can look now.
I'm decent.
Mostly. She turned back slowly, and oh no, because mostly decent apparently meant a prince with disheveled dark hair, amber eyes that seemed to glow in the early morning light, and a cloak that left most of his chest and the black tribal markings visible. He looked wild, dangerous, and far too attractive for Abigail's already overwhelmed brain to handle. You're staring, he said softly, that amused tone back. You threw away your kingdom for me. Abigail shot back, defensive. I think I'm allowed to stare. His expression softened. I didn't throw it away. I chose you. There's a difference. He moved closer, but not close enough to crowd her. Are you hurt? The power release. I've never seen anything like that. Are you?
Ivy fine.
She wasn't, not really. Her entire body ached like she'd been struck by lightning, and she could still feel the silver flames coiled beneath her skin, waiting. I need a minute to process everything. Take all the time you need. Arthur gestured to a fallen log near the stream. I'll scout the perimeter, make sure we weren't followed. There's water if you're thirsty, and he paused, uncertainty crossing his face. Abigail, when was the last time you ate? The question caught her off guard. Yesterday? Maybe? I don't remember. Concern flooded his eyes, and before she could protest, he was pulling her toward the log, gently pushing her to sit. Stay here. I'll find food. We're deep enough in the forest that there should be deer, maybe rabbits. I'll be quick. Arthur. But he'd already shifted and disappeared into the trees, leaving her alone with the sound of running water and her own chaotic thoughts. Abigail sat by the stream and tried not to fall apart. Everything had changed in a single night. She'd gone from a nameless servant to a fugitive, from invisible to the most hunted creature in the kingdom. And she'd gained a mate, a prince, who looked at her like she was worth more than his crown. It was too much. Too fast. She knelt by the water and caught sight of her reflection. Her hair was still white, gleaming like fresh snow in the sunlight. Her eyes were silver, though not as brilliantly glowing as they'd been during the power release. And there, on her neck where the collar had been, was a mark, a silver crescent moon with intricate knotwork radiating outward. The mark of the pure blood, she realized. The symbol that had gotten so many of her ancestors killed. "They're going to find me," she whispered to her reflection. "And when they do, Arthur will die trying to protect me. So get stronger," that ancient voice whispered back. "Stop being afraid of what you are. Embrace it. Or lose him." Before she could respond, Arthur emerged from the treeline in human form again, carrying 2 rabbits and looking pleased with himself. "Told you I'd be quick. Can you make a fire, or should I?" "I can do it." Abigail's hands moved before her brain caught up, silver flames dancing across her fingers. She touched the ground, and a small, controlled fire sprang to life, burning without smoke. Arthur's eyes widened. "That's incredible." "That's terrifying," Abigail corrected, staring at her hands. "I could barely light a candle yesterday. Now I'm conjuring fire like it's nothing." "It's not nothing. It's power." He crouched beside the fire, preparing the rabbits with practiced ease. "And power isn't inherently bad, Abigail. It's just power. What matters is what we do with it." "Easy for you to say. You're an alpha. Power is expected from you." "Expected, yes. But not easy." His voice went quiet. "I've spent my entire life being told I'd be king someday. That my power, my decisions, my strength would determine the fate of thousands. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake wondering if I was strong enough? If I'd make the right choices when it mattered?" Abigail looked at him, really looked, and saw the weight he carried beneath that confident exterior. "And then last night, I made the easiest choice of my life," Arthur continued, meeting her gaze. "You or the crown. You or duty. And there was no question, Abigail. Not even for a second. Because you're mine, and I'm yours, and nothing else comes close to mattering as much as that." Her throat tightened. "You barely know me. Then let me know you." He held out a piece of cooked rabbit, a peace offering. "We've got time now."
No guards. No protocols.
"Just us. So tell me something real. Something you've never told anyone." Abigail took the food, her mind racing. "Something real. Something true." "I've never shifted," she finally said. "Not once. The collar prevented it. So I don't even know what my wolf form looks like." Arthur's expression shifted to something between heartbreak and fury. "They caged you. Your whole life. They were afraid of me, of what I could become." She took a bite of the rabbit, the warm food grounding her. "Mara, the woman who raised me, she said purebloods were eliminated because we were too powerful. That a single pureblood Omega could command any alpha, break any pack bond, rewrite the laws of the goddess herself. And they thought killing children was the solution?" Arthur's voice was harsh with barely contained rage. "They thought survival was more important than mercy." Abigail set down the food, her appetite gone. "And maybe they were right. Maybe I am too dangerous. Maybe." "Stop." Arthur moved until he was directly in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Abigail. You are not dangerous. You're powerful, yes. But power and danger aren't the same thing. And anyone who tried to kill you for something you were born with was wrong. Unforgivably wrong." Tears burned in her eyes. "You don't understand what it was like. Growing up knowing that if anyone discovered what I was, they'd execute me without trial. Watching other servants form friendships, find mates, live freely while I had to hide every part of myself. I'm so tired, Arthur. I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then stop being afraid." His hands slid up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had escaped. I know it's not that simple. I know fear doesn't just vanish because someone tells you to let it go. But you're not alone anymore, Abigail. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and golden and right. And for the first time in her life, Abigail let herself lean into it, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight every battle by herself. Together, she repeated softly. Together, Author promised. But their peace was short-lived. 3 days passed in the Shadow Pine Forest. 3 days of learning each other's stories, of Author teaching Abigail basic survival skills, and Abigail slowly growing comfortable with her emerging powers. 3 days of the mate bond strengthening, pulling them closer until sleeping apart became physically painful. They hadn't completed the bond, not fully. That required a claiming bite, an exchange of marks that would tie them together permanently. And Abigail wasn't ready. Not when she still didn't know how to control the power inside her. Not when completing the bond might put Author at even greater risk.
But gods, she wanted to.
Wanted to give in to the pull, to the way Author looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never spoken. Wanted to explore the attraction that simmered between them every time their hands touched, every time she caught him watching her with those amber eyes dark with barely restrained hunger. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Abigail woke to Finn. Author already up, his body tense as he stared toward the southern edge of their camp. His wolf was close to the surface, his eyes flickering between human and animal. "What is it?" she asked quietly, moving to his side. "We're being tracked." His voice was grim. "I caught the scent about an hour ago. They're still distant, but closing fast." Ice flooded Abigail's veins. "The King's Guards." "No." Author's jaw clenched. "These are hunters. Mercenaries who specialize in tracking rare bloodlines. They're good, Abigail. Too good. If they've found us this quickly..." A howl split the morning air. Then another. And another. Not wolf howls. Something else. Something wrong. "Hellhounds," Author breathed, horror dawning in his eyes. They brought hellhounds. Abigail had heard stories of the creatures. Massive beasts bred specifically to hunt supernatural prey, immune to most magic, relentless in their pursuit. They were expensive, illegal in most territories, and brutally effective. "We need to run," Author said, already moving.
Now.
"If they've got hellhounds, they're not here to capture you. They're here to kill you." But Abigail didn't move. Couldn't move. Because as the howls grew closer and the sound of breaking branches echoed through the forest, something inside her snapped. She was done running. Done hiding. Done being afraid. The silver flames erupted from her skin without conscious thought, spreading outward in a protective circle around the camp. Author spun toward her, shock and concern warring on his face. "Abigail, what are you?" "I'm not running anymore." Her voice was steady, cold, infused with power that made the air itself tremble. "They want to hunt me? Fine. Let them come. Let them see what happens when you corner a pureblood." "Abigail." The first hellhound burst into the clearing. It was massive, easily the size of a bear, with matted black fur and eyes that glowed red like burning coals. Foam dripped from its jaws, and its claws tore furrows in the earth as it charged straight for Abigail. She didn't flinch. She raised one hand, and the silver flames coalesced into a spear of pure light. "Down," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The hellhound slammed into the ground mid-charge, its legs buckling, its massive body forced into submission by a power it couldn't resist. It whined, a sound of confusion and fear, unable to understand why its body no longer obeyed its own mind. 3 more hellhounds emerged from the trees. All 3 dropped instantly, driven to the ground by Abigail's will alone. And behind them came the hunters themselves. 5 men in dark leather armor, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind masks. The leader stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and professional. The Pureblood Omega. Stand down and come quietly, and we'll make your death quick. No, Abigail said simply. The leader cocked his head. Then you'll die screaming. And so will your mate. That was the wrong thing to say. Because Arthur snarled, a sound of pure alpha fury, and shifted in a blur of motion, placing himself between Abigail and the hunters. His black wolf was enormous, radiating dominance that would have made normal wolves submit instantly. But hunters weren't normal wolves. They were trained to kill creatures like him. Arthur, don't. Abigail started. Too late. The hunters moved as one, their weapons, silver-tipped and spelled, flashing in the morning light. Arthur was fast, but they were coordinated, working as a unit to separate him from Abigail, to isolate and overwhelm. One blade caught him across the shoulder. He yelped, stumbling. And something in Abigail broke. The silver flames exploded outward like a supernova. Not heat, not destruction. Pure, absolute power that washed over the clearing and froze every creature in place. The hunters, the hellhounds, even the trees seemed to bend toward her, acknowledging her dominance. You dare? Abigail's voice wasn't human anymore. It was layered, ancient, the voice of every pureblood Omega who had ever lived speaking through her. You dare attack my mate? My bond. She moved forward, and the silver flames moved with her, taking shape around her body like armor, like wings, like the manifestation of power that had been caged for 17 years and was finally free. I am Abigail of the pure bloodline. Each word made the ground tremble. I am the daughter of the old magic, the child of the moon goddess's first blessing. And you will kneel. It wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by every ounce of her ancient power. The hunters dropped to their knees, their weapons clattering from nerveless fingers. The hellhounds whined and pressed their bellies to the ground. Even the forest itself seemed to bow in her presence. And Abigail stood at the center of it all, terrible and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable. Leave, she said quietly. Return to whoever hired you, and tell them this. The last pure blood will not be hunted, will not be caged, and anyone who tries will face the full fury of what they tried to destroy. The hunters fled, scrambling to their feet, abandoning their weapons and their hellhounds, running like the terrified prey they'd tried to make her. When they were gone, Abigail's flames flickered and died, and she collapsed. Arthur, who had shifted back to human form, caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. Abigail, love, stay with me. I'm okay, she mumbled, exhausted beyond measure. Just that took a lot out of me. You were magnificent. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice rough with emotion. Absolutely magnificent. But please don't ever scare me like that again. Can't promise that. She managed a weak smile. Seems like scaring you is part of the package deal. He laughed, shaky but genuine, and held her tighter. Then I guess I'd better get used to it. As Abigail drifted toward unconsciousness, one thought crystallized in her mind. She wasn't the hunted anymore. She was the hunter. And anyone who threatened her mate would learn exactly why purebloods had been feared. Drop a comment if you're living for powerful Abigail. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, it's about to get even more intense. Abigail woke to the sound of rain and the warmth of Arthur's body curled protectively around hers. They'd moved after the hunter attack, traveling deeper into the shadow pine until they found a cave system that offered better shelter. Arthur had carried her the entire way, refusing to let her walk even when she insisted she was fine. Now they lay on a bed of pine needles and moss, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chest pressed to her back. Safe. She felt safe. You're awake, Arthur murmured against her hair. How do you feel? Like I used power I didn't know I had and passed out from exhaustion. She turned in his arms, meeting his concerned gaze. How long was I asleep? 8 hours. You scared me, Abigail. When you collapsed. I know. She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to, I just couldn't let them hurt you. The thought of you bleeding, of you being in danger because of me. Something inside me just snapped. That's the mate bond. His hand covered hers, holding it against his face. It makes us protective of each other. Sometimes irrational about it. His amber eyes darkened. Because when I saw that blade cut you, even though it was just a scratch, I wanted to tear them apart with my bare hands. It was more than the bond, Abigail said quietly. I felt my ancestors, author. All the purebloods who came before me, like they were standing behind me, lending me their strength. And I heard her voice, the goddess. Author went very still. What did she say? That I was the last daughter of the old blood. That I wasn't meant to hide. I was meant to rise. Abigail's throat tightened. But I don't know how. I don't know how to control this power, how to be what she wants me to be. And I'm terrified that if I try, I'll hurt people.
Hurt you?
You could never hurt me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He pulled her closer until there was no space between them. Because I've seen you, Abigail. The real you. And you're not a weapon. You're not a threat. You're a woman who's been forced to hide her entire life, who's been told she's too dangerous to exist. But that's a lie. The only thing dangerous about you is how much you care, how deeply you feel. That's what makes you powerful. Not the flames. Not the commands. You. Tears stung her eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear. He smiled, soft and devastatingly tender. Because you're my mate. And I'd spend every moment of my life figuring out how to take away your pain, if I could. The bond between them burned, pulling them closer, demanding more. And Abigail was so tired of fighting it, so tired of holding back. Author, she whispered. I think I'm ready. His eyes flashed gold. Ready for what?
For us.
For the claiming bite. She took a shaky breath. For everything. The air between them went electric. Abigail. His voice was strained. You don't have to if you're not sure. I'm sure. She cupped his face with both hands. I've been sure since the moment you chose me over your kingdom. Since you carried me away from danger and looked at me like I was worth more than a crown. I want this, author. I want you. Completely. He kissed her. Not gentle. Not tentative. This was need and hunger, and weeks of denied desire finally breaking free. His mouth claimed hers like he was starving for the taste of her, his hands sliding into her white hair, angling her head for better access. Abigail kissed him back with equal desperation, her fingers tracing the muscles of his back, the tribal markings that marked him as royalty. He was heat and strength and hers, and she wanted to drown in him. Are you sure? He asked again, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. Once we do this, once I mark you, there's no going back. We'll be bonded permanently. My life tied to yours. Your pain will be mine. My emotions will bleed into yours. It's forever, Abigail. I know. She smiled through the tears now streaming down her face. And I've never been more certain of anything. Forever with you sounds perfect. His answering smile was pure joy, pure relief, pure love. And then he was kissing her again, his hands exploring, learning every curve and line of her body while she did the same to him. They shed the minimal clothing they had between reverent touches and whispered promises. And when he finally settled between her thighs, his amber eyes meeting her silver ones, the world narrowed to just the two of them. I love you, he said, the words fierce and true. I will spend every day of my life proving that to you. I love you too, Abigail whispered back. My alpha. My mate. My author. They moved together, learning each other's rhythms, building towards something that felt sacred and wild all at once. And when the moment came, when pleasure crested and their wolves howled in unison, Author's canines extended and he bit down on the junction between her neck and shoulder, his mark sinking deep. The bond exploded into full brilliance. Gold and silver threads twining together, wrapping around their souls, binding them so completely that Abigail couldn't tell where she ended and Arthur began. She felt his love, his devotion, his absolute certainty that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And she hoped he felt hers too. When it was over, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, the claiming mark on Abigail's neck glowing softly with silver light. "Mine," Arthur murmured, pressing a kiss to the mark.
"Forgermine."
"Yours," Abigail agreed, her fingers tracing the matching mark she'd left on his shoulder, a silver crescent moon that pulsed with power. "And you're mine. Forever." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the mate bond that would tie them together for the rest of their lives. But outside the cave, the world was shifting. In the royal palace, King Roman stared at the report in his hands, his expression carved from stone. "The hunters failed," Elder Theo said quietly from his position by the window. "Not only failed, they were sent running by a single command from the pureblood. She's awakened to her full power, Your Majesty. And she's bonded to your son." "I can feel it," Roman said, his voice hollow. "The bond. It's complete." Every alpha in the kingdom could feel it, the new bond between the crown prince and his mate, radiating outward like a beacon. Normally, such an announcement would be cause for celebration. A prince finding his mate was considered a blessing from the goddess herself. But this was a disaster. "The other kingdoms will hear of this within days," Councilwoman Nora said, her face pale. "A pureblood Omega bonded to the heir of the strongest wolf kingdom in the territories. They'll see it as a threat." "It is a threat," another council member argued. "If Prince Arthur claims the throne with a pureblood at his side." "He won't claim the throne," Roman interrupted, his voice flat. "I cannot allow it. A pureblood's power is too great, too unpredictable. She could control every alpha in the kingdom with a single command, could rewrite pact bonds, break sacred laws, turn our entire society upside down. She could also save us," Elder Theo said quietly. "The old texts speak of purebloods as the moon goddess's greatest gift, Omegas who could heal what was broken, unite what was divided, bring peace where there was war, or bring destruction where there was order." Roman set down the report. "I will not risk this kingdom on ancient prophecies and maybes. The law is clear. Purebloods are to be eliminated on sight, even if it means killing your own son." Theo's voice was sharp. "Because that's what you're talking about, Roman. Arthur has completed the bond. If she dies, he dies. There is no separating them now." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Roman spoke, and his words were those of a king, not a father. "Then we don't kill her. We contain her. The ancient cells beneath the temple, the ones built specifically to hold powerful Omegas, they still function. We capture them both, separate them, and keep her imprisoned where her power can't threaten anyone." "You would cage your own son?" Theo asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "I would save my kingdom." Roman's expression was steel. "Even if it costs me everything else. Mobilize every Abigail Eilable guard. Find them. Bring them back. And may the goddess forgive us for what we're about to do." Meanwhile, in a territory far to the north, Alpha Zane of the North Mountain Pack read the intelligence report with growing interest. "A pureblood Omega.
Alive.
Bonded to the Crown Prince.
Perfect."
"How reliable is this information?" he asked his beta, Dane. "Very. Multiple sources confirmed it. The power signature during her awakening was felt across 3 territories." Dane shifted his weight. "Sir, if the rumors are true, if she really is a pureblood, then whoever controls her controls the future of all wolf territories," Zane finished. He smiled, cold and calculating. "The prince is powerful, yes. But he's young, inexperienced, and he's so blinded by the mate bond that he won't see us coming until it's too late. You want to take her by force? I want to offer her something better than running for her life." Zane stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the war room. If we can convince her that she'd be safer here, that we'd protect her from the king's execution order, that we'd let her live freely, she'd bring the crown prince with her, Dane realized. And with a pureblood and a royal alpha in our territory, the balance of power would shift dramatically in our favor. Exactly. Zane's eyes gleamed. Send word to our best trackers. Find them before Roman does. And when you do, make sure they understand. We're not their enemies. We're their salvation. Back in the cave, Abigail woke to the sensation of danger crawling up her spine. She sat bolt upright, her silver eyes scanning the darkness. Beside her, Arthur stirred, instantly alert. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Something's wrong." Her hand went to her claiming mark, which was burning with warning. "Someone's coming. Multiple someones." Arthur's wolf surged to the surface, his senses sharpening. And then he caught it, the sense. Dozens of them, surrounding the cave system, moving with military precision. "Father's guards," he said grimly. "They found us." But there was something else. Another scent, coming from the opposite direction. Unfamiliar wolves, not from their kingdom. "We're surrounded," Abigail whispered, fear and anger warring in her chest. "Arthur, what do we?" A voice called out from the cave entrance, amplified by Alpha Command. "Prince Arthur, Abigail of the Pureblood line. This is Commander Liam of the Royal Guard. By order of King Roman, you are commanded to surrender yourselves peacefully." From the other direction, a different voice. "This is Alpha Zane of the North Mountain Pack. We come offering sanctuary, not chains. We mean you no harm."
Trapped.
They were absolutely trapped. Abigail's hands began to glow with silver flames, and Arthur shifted partially, his claws extending, his eyes pure gold. "Whatever we do," Arthur said, his voice steady despite the impossible situation, "we do it together." "Together," Abigail agreed. And as the two forces closed in, demanding surrender, demanding control, demanding everything, Abigail made a choice that would change everything. She stepped out of the cave, silver flames blazing around her like wings, her voice carrying power that made every wolf within earshot flinch. "I surrender to no one." And the real battle began. The silver flames erupted from Abigail's body like a tidal wave, spreading outward in a protective barrier that forced both armies to stumble backward. Royal Guards and North Mountain wolves alike hit the ground, their bodies overwhelmed by the sheer power radiating from the small, white-haired Omega standing at the cave entrance. "I said," Abigail repeated, her voice echoing with ancient authority, "I surrender to no one." Commander Liam recovered first, his alpha training helping him resist her power just enough to stay on his feet. "Stand down, miss. We don't want to hurt you." "Then leave." The flames pulsed brighter. "Take your guards, return to your king, and tell him that his son has made his choice. I am Arthur's mate, bonded by the moon goddess herself. No law supersedes that. Not even a king's. The law states that purebloods are extinct," Abigail interrupted, "because your ancestors murdered them. Men, women, children, entire bloodlines erased because you feared what we represented. Well, I'm what survived. And I will not go quietly into a cage just because it makes you feel safer." From the opposite side, Alpha Zane stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He was massive, even for an alpha, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like ice. "No one is asking you to go into a cage. I'm offering sanctuary, protection, a place where you and Prince Arthur can live without fear of execution." Arthur, now fully shifted into his wolf form, positioned himself beside Abigail, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He didn't trust either side. Not the guards who'd come to imprison them, and certainly not the foreign alpha who claimed to want to help. "Why?" Abigail asked, her eyes locked on Zane. "Why would you offer us sanctuary? What do you gain?" Zane smiled, cold and calculating despite his peaceful words. "The truth? Having a pureblood Omega and the Crown Prince in my territory would strengthen my pack's position considerably. But that doesn't mean my offer isn't genuine. You need allies, girl. And I can provide what the king never will. Freedom. Freedom in exchange for loyalty, Abigail said flatly. For my power used on your behalf. For a mutually beneficial arrangement, Zane corrected smoothly. I protect you from those who would kill you. You help ensure my pack remains strong. Everyone wins. Except they wouldn't. Abigail could see it in his eyes, in the way his pack members watched her like she was a prize to be won. Zane didn't want to protect her. He wanted to own her. To use her power for his own political games. She'd gone from one cage to another. No, Abigail said simply. Zane's friendly expression flickered. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I'm making is standing here listening to either of you. Abigail's flames intensified, forcing both groups back another step. I spent 17 years being told I was too dangerous to exist, too powerful to be free. And now you all want to control me. Some through imprisonment, some through false promises. Well, here's the truth. I don't belong to anyone. Not to your king.
Not to your pack.
Only to myself. And to him. She gestured to Arthur, who stood proud and protective at her side. We're leaving, Abigail continued. And if anyone tries to stop us, if anyone makes the mistake of getting between me and my mate, you'll learn exactly why our ancestors feared purebloods enough to try to eliminate them all. It was a bluff. Sort of. Abigail had no idea if she could actually fight off two armies, especially when her control over her power was still shaky at best. But she poured every ounce of confidence she could muster into her voice, into her stance, into the flames that danced around her like living creatures. For a moment it worked. Both sides hesitated, unwilling to test whether the purebloods' threat was genuine. And then Commander Liam made a choice that shattered everything. I'm sorry, he said, his voice genuinely regretful. But I have my orders. He pulled out a small crystal vial filled with dark, swirling liquid and hurled it at Abigail's feet. It shattered on impact, releasing a cloud of black smoke that smelled like death and dark magic. Wolfsbane vapor. The concentrated kind, mixed with spelled ash, designed specifically to suppress shifter abilities and disorient supernatural senses. Abigail's flames guttered and died as the vapor hit her lungs. She gasped, dropping to her knees as her power was forcefully suppressed, as her connection to her wolf was severed, as everything that made her strong was stripped away in seconds. And oh, Arthur's howl was anguished, furious. He lunged for the guards, but 3 wolves tackled him mid-leap, bearing him to the ground. Silver chains materialized, spelled ones, strong enough to hold even a royal alpha. Don't hurt him, Abigail tried to scream, but her voice came out weak, barely a whisper. The wolfsbane vapor was designed for purebloods. It was working, shutting down her system faster than any normal dose would affect a regular Omega. We're not going to hurt him, Commander Liam said, moving toward her cautiously. But he's bonded to you. If we don't restrain him, he'll fight until he's dead trying to reach you. He looked genuinely pained as he continued. I'm sorry, miss. Truly. But the king's word is law. And the law says you must be contained. Through the haze of wolfsbane poisoning, Abigail watched as more guards moved in, carrying a cage, iron and spelled silver, carved with suppression runes identical to the collar she'd worn for years. They were going to lock her up, make her a prisoner again, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. Abigail, Arthur's voice was ragged, desperate. He was still fighting, still struggling against the chains and the wolves holding him down, even though silver was burning his skin. Abigail, please. But Alpha Zane wasn't going to let the prize slip away so easily. Attack, he commanded his pack. Secure the pureblood. Kill anyone who gets in your way. And just like that, the clearing erupted into chaos. North Mountain wolves crashed into the royal guards, and suddenly it wasn't a capture mission anymore. It was a battlefield. Snarls and screams filled the air. Blood spattered the ground. And in the center of it all, Abigail lay paralyzed by wolfsbane vapor, watching her worst nightmare unfold. People were dying. Because of her. The bond screamed as Arthur continued to fight, continued to try to reach her despite the chains and the guards and the enemy wolves tearing into his allies. She could feel his pain, his terror, his absolute refusal to let them take her. I have to do something, Abigail thought desperately. I have to. But the wolfsbane had her in its grip, draining her strength, suffocating her power. She was helpless. Useless. Just like they'd always said she'd be without her power to protect her. A North Mountain wolf broke through the guard line and lunged straight for her, jaws open, clearly intending to grab her and run before anyone could stop him. Abigail braced for impact and watched as Arthur somehow broke through the silver chains and intercepted the wolf mid-leap, his massive black form crashing into the enemy with devastating force. They tumbled across the ground in a tangle of fur and fangs, and Abigail heard Arthur's yelp of pain as claws raked across his side. "No," she whimpered. "Arthur, stop, you're hurt." But he wouldn't stop. He'd never stop. Not while she was in danger. And that realization broke something fundamental inside Abigail. She'd been running her whole life. Running from her power, from her destiny, from the truth of what she was. And now, the one person who'd ever chosen her, who'd ever looked at her and seen something worth protecting, was going to die because she was too weak to save him.
No. No.
Not like this. Deep inside her, past the wolfsbane suppression, past the fear and the helplessness, Abigail found something the poison couldn't touch. Not her wolf. Not her flames. Something older. Something that existed before the goddess gave wolves their forms, before the first pureblood was born.
Will.
Pure, absolute, unbreakable will. I am Abigail, she thought, pouring every ounce of determination she possessed into those words. I am pureblood. I am Omega. And I will not let my mate die for me. The silver flames ignited.
Not outside her body this time.
Inside. Burning through her veins, searing away the wolfsbane poison, reclaiming her power inch by agonizing inch. It hurt. Gods, it hurt worse than anything she'd ever experienced. Like being reborn through fire while still conscious. But she endured. Because Arthur was bleeding. Because wolves were dying. Because she was done being the helpless girl who needed saving. She was the storm. And it was time everyone remembered why purebloods had been feared. Abigail's eyes snapped open, blazing pure silver white. The wolfsbane vapor evaporated instantly, burned away by the heat of her power. The ground beneath her cracked, spiderweb fissures spreading outward as she slowly rose to her feet. Every wolf in the clearing froze. Because the power radiating from Abigail now wasn't like before. This wasn't the explosive, uncontrolled release of her awakening. This was focused, deliberate. The power of someone who'd finally stopped fighting what she was and embraced it. Enough, she said, and her voice carried across the battlefield like thunder. Every wolf, guard, North Mountain Pack member, even Arthur, dropped to their knees, forced down by the sheer weight of her command. Alpha dominance meant nothing in the face of a pureblood's will. She outranked them all. Every single one. This ends now, Abigail continued, walking through the carnage, her bare feet leaving glowing silver footprints on the blood-soaked ground. No more fighting. No more killing. No more treating me like a prize to be won or a threat to be eliminated. She stopped in front of Commander Liam, who was on his knees, his head bowed in involuntary submission. "Return to your king," she told him, her voice still carrying that otherworldly authority. "Tell King Roman that I will not be caged. Tell him that his son chose me, and I have chosen him in return, and no law written by fearful men will change that. Tell him that if he wants peace, he will leave us alone. But if he wants war..." Her flames pulsed brighter. "Then I will show him exactly what his ancestors were so afraid of." She turned to Alpha Zane next, who was fighting the compulsion to kneel but losing. "And you," Abigail said coldly. I see through your offer of sanctuary. You don't want to protect me, you want to use me. You saw an opportunity for power and tried to take it. Well, here's what you've won, my enmity. If I ever see your pack on our trail again, if you ever threaten what's mine, I will make you regret the day you were born." The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Then Abigail released the command, and every wolf sagged with relief as their bodies returned to their own control. She turned and walked straight to Arthur, who was bleeding from multiple wounds, his amber eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. "Can you walk?" she asked softly, all the terrifying power bleeding out of her voice, replaced by gentle worry. Yes, he managed, shifting back to human form. "Abigail, what you just did. We're leaving." She helped him to his feet, her hands gentle on his injured body.
"Now."
"Before anyone decides to test whether I was bluffing." "Were you?" Arthur asked quietly as they walked away from the two armies, from the battlefield, from everything. "Bluffing? No," Abigail admitted. "And that's what terrifies me." They walked for hours, until they were certain no one was following, until Arthur's wounds had stopped bleeding and Abigail's power had settled back beneath her skin. Finally, they collapsed beside a stream, exhausted beyond measure. "I thought I lost you," Arthur said hoarsely, pulling her into his arms. "When they threw that wolfsbane, when I saw you fall, I've never been that terrified in my life." "I thought I lost you too." Abigail pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, reassuring herself that he was alive, that they were both still here. "You broke silver chains, Arthur. You shouldn't have been able to. Mate bond," he explained tiredly. "When your mate is in mortal danger, the bond gives you strength you shouldn't have. It's instinct. Survival." His arms tightened around her. "I'd break 1,000 chains to reach you, Abigail. 1,000. They can't make restraints strong enough to keep me from you." Tears streamed down her face. "This is my fault. All of it. If I'd just—" "Stop." Arthur pulled back enough to look at her, his amber eyes fierce. "None of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be born a pureblood. You didn't ask to be hunted and caged. And you sure as hell didn't ask for two armies to show up trying to control you. But people died, Arthur. Because of me. Because of them."
His voice was hard.
"Because they chose violence. You tried to walk away. You gave them a chance to leave peacefully. They're the ones who escalated." "I used my power on them," Abigail whispered. "Forced them to kneel. Threatened them with destruction. What does that make me?" "Strong," Arthur said immediately. "It makes you strong. And I know you're worried that your power makes you a monster, but Abigail, you saved lives today. If you hadn't stopped that battle when you did, everyone would have kept fighting until there was no one left. You stopped the killing. That's not monstrous. That's mercy." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that her power could be used for good, that she wasn't the threat everyone had always claimed. But the fear lingered. The question of what she might become if she let her power run free. "What if I can't control it?" she asked quietly. "What if one day I lose control and hurt someone I don't mean to?"
"Hurt you?"
Then we figured out together. Arthur's hand cupped her face. "Abigail, I meant what I said. Forever. Through every challenge, every fear, every moment of doubt, I'm with you. We'll learn to control your power. We'll find others who can teach you. Hell, we'll write our own rulebook if we have to. But we do it together." The bond between them hummed with warmth, with certainty, with love that defied logic. "I don't deserve you," Abigail whispered. "You deserve everything," Arthur countered. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you believe that." They sat by the stream as the sun set, holding each other, drawing strength from their bond. They were hunted, alone, marked as fugitives by the most powerful kingdom in the territories. But they had each other, and somehow that felt like enough. What they didn't know was that far away, in the ancient temple ruins, something was waking, a presence that had slept for centuries, bound by spells and wards and prayers. But Abigail's power, the first true pureblood in 300 years, had resonated across the supernatural world like a bell being rung. And ancient things respond to ancient calls. In the darkness beneath the temple, chains began to rattle. Eyes opened, dozens of them, glowing with hunger and hatred. And a voice older than memory whispered into the void. The daughter of Silver Flame has risen. Finally. After so long, finally. The prophecy begins. 3 days after the battle, Abigail and Arthur found sanctuary in a place they'd never expected, a village of outcasts. They'd been following rumors, whispers Arthur had heard during his time as Crown Prince about a settlement deep in the unclaimed territories where wolves who didn't fit into the traditional pack structure lived freely. Omegas who refused to bond. Alphas who rejected dominance hierarchies. Betas who wanted nothing to do with politics. The sanctuary, they called it. And as Abigail and Arthur emerged from the forest into a clearing filled with simple cabins, gardens, and wolves moving about their daily lives with easy contentment, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks.
Hope.
An elderly woman approached them, her silver hair braided down her back, her eyes sharp but kind. She took one look at Abigail's white hair and silver eyes and smiled. "Well," she said warmly, "I'll be damned. A pureblood. Didn't think I'd live to see one." She extended her hand.
"I'm Ellie."
"Welcome to the sanctuary, children. You look like you've been through hell." "Multiple hells," Arthur said wearily, shaking her hand. "I'm Arthur. This is Abigail. We're bonded," Ellie finished, her gaze catching the marks on both their necks. "Yes, I can see that. And, unless I'm mistaken, you're the crown prince everyone's been talking about. The one who abandoned his kingdom for his mate." "News travels fast," Arthur muttered. "News of a pureblood and a royal alpha on the run? That's not news, son. That's a legend in making." Ellie gestured for them to follow.
"Come."
"You'll want to meet Elder Kara. She's been waiting for you." "Waiting for us?" Abigail asked, confused. "How?" "Because she saw you coming." Ellie's smile was mysterious. "Kara has the sight, the gift of prophecy. She's known about you for weeks, child. Said the Silver Flame daughter would arrive when the moon was half dark. And look at that." She pointed to the sky where the moon hung, perfectly bisected between light and shadow. Right on schedule. Elder Kara's cabin was set apart from the others, surrounded by gardens filled with herbs and flowers that hummed with quiet magic. The woman herself was ancient, possibly the oldest wolf Abigail had ever seen, with skin like weathered parchment and eyes that looked like they'd witnessed centuries. "Sit," Kara said before they'd even crossed the threshold. "We have much to discuss and little time to waste." They sat at her small wooden table while she prepared tea with slow, deliberate movements. Finally, she placed cups in front of each of them and fixed Abigail with a stare that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "You're afraid of your power," Kara stated. It wasn't a question, but Abigail answered anyway. "Yes."
"Good."
"Fear means wisdom. It's the ones who aren't afraid of their power who become monsters." Kara sipped her tea. "But fear cannot be your master, child. You must learn to be afraid and powerful, to acknowledge the danger you pose while refusing to let that danger control you." "I don't know how," Abigail admitted. "Every time I use my power, it feels like I'm one step away from losing control, from becoming the threat everyone says I am." "Because you're fighting it." Kara leaned forward. "Your power isn't separate from you, Abigail. It's not a beast to be caged or a weapon to be controlled. It's you, the truest expression of who you are. And until you accept that, until you stop seeing yourself as dangerous and start seeing yourself as powerful, you'll never find balance." "But what if accepting it means?" "Means what? That you might use your power for something other than defense? That you might command others, influence them, shape the world according to your will." Kara's eyes glittered. "That's not evil, child. That's leadership. And it's exactly what the old purebloods were. Leaders.
Queens.
Advisors to kings. They didn't hide their power, they wielded it. With wisdom, with compassion, but without apology. The words struck something deep in Abigail's chest. She'd spent her whole life apologizing for existing, for being too powerful, too dangerous, too much. And now this ancient wolf was telling her that the problem wasn't her power, it was her shame about it. The prophecy speaks of you, Kara continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. The last daughter of Silver Flame, bonded to the Wolf of Gold. Together, you will either unite the kingdoms or watch them burn. The choice is yours. But know this, you cannot make that choice while hiding from what you are. What prophecy? Author demanded. You're the second person to mention prophecies about Abigail. What do they say? Kara's gaze shifted to him, softening slightly. That a pureblood would rise in the time of greatest darkness. That she would be hunted, feared, nearly destroyed. But if she survived, if she found her courage and her mate stood beside her, she would become the bridge between the old ways and the new. A queen without a crown. A power without a throne. The one who would remind all wolves what we'd lost when we eliminated the purebloods. And if she doesn't survive? Abigail asked quietly. Then the kingdoms tear each other apart within a generation. Kara's voice was matter-of-fact. The balance has been broken for 3 centuries, child. The purebloods were the ones who maintained it, who used their power to mediate between alphas, to protect omegas from abuse, to ensure that strength served the pack rather than enslaved it. Without them, we've descended into constant power struggles, territory wars, and rigid hierarchies that benefit the few while oppressing the many. She gestured toward the window, toward the village beyond. These wolves? They're here because the traditional pack structure failed them. Because they were deemed too weak, too rebellious, too different to fit into the boxes their alphas demanded. And there are thousands more like them across the territories, suffering under systems that no longer work. You could change that, Abigail. You could be what they need. I'm just one person, Abigail protested. One person with the power to command alphas, Kara countered. One person bonded to a prince who understands how kingdoms function. One person who's already proven she'd rather fight than submit to injustice. She reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Abigail's. You're not just one person, child. You're a symbol, a possibility. The proof that purebloods can exist without destroying everything around them. Tears burned in Abigail's eyes. What if I fail? What if I try to be what you're describing and I just break everything instead? Then you fail, Kara said simply. And you learn. And you try again. That's what living is, Abigail. Making mistakes. Growing. Becoming who you're meant to be, one choice at a time. She squeezed Abigail's hand gently. But you don't have to figure it all out today. For now, stay here.
Rest.
Learn. I can teach you to control your power, to understand it. And when you're ready, when you're strong, then you can decide what kind of future you want to build. Abigail looked at Arthur, silently asking his opinion. He smiled, warm and encouraging and full of faith in her. It's your choice, love. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. She turned back to Kara. Okay, teach me. The training began the next morning. Kara led Abigail to a clearing deep in the forest, far enough from the village that an accidental power surge wouldn't endanger anyone. Arthur came too, refusing to let Abigail out of his sight for long, though he stayed at the edge of the clearing to give them space. First lesson, Kara said, standing in the center of the clearing. Your power responds to emotion. Fear makes it defensive. Anger makes it aggressive. But what you need is calm. The kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty in who you are and what you're capable of. I don't think I've ever been certain about anything, Abigail admitted. Then we start there.
Kort gestert for hertugset.
Tell me about yourself. Not what you've been told you are. Not what others fear you might become. Who are you, Abigail? What do you value? What do you love? What would you fight to protect? Abigail hesitated, then slowly began to speak. About growing up in the shadows. about Mara's kindness, about years of loneliness and fear. And then about Arthur, about how he'd seen her and chosen her and made her feel, for the first time, like she might be worth something. Him, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. I'd fight to protect him, to protect what we have, our bond, our future.
Good. Garanadith.
That's your anchor. When your power surges, when you feel control slipping, you remember why you're fighting to maintain it. Not because you're afraid of what you might do, but because you have something precious you refuse to risk. She held out her hand, and a small flame appeared, not silver like Abigail's, but warm gold.
Now.
Call your flames. But don't force them. Don't fight them. Just invite them. Like you're welcoming an old friend. Abigail closed her eyes and reached inward, past the fear and the shame and the doubt, searching for her power. And this time, instead of trying to cage it or control it, she simply acknowledged it. Hello, she thought. I'm ready to work with you. To understand you. Will you meet me halfway? The silver flames responded instantly, rising to the surface, not with explosive force, but with gentle warmth. They wrapped around her hands like gloves, beautiful and steady and controlled. Perfect, Kara said, her voice pleased. Now hold them. Feel how they move. Understand that they're not separate from you. They're an extension of your will. They can only do what you allow them to do. Abigail held the flames, marveling at how different this felt from every other time she'd used her power. This wasn't violence or desperation. This was partnership. Good, Kara continued. Now I'm going to push back. And you're going to hold your ground without increasing your power. Defense without aggression. Can you do that? Abigail nodded. Kara's golden flames pressed against Abigail's silver ones, testing, probing. Abigail's instinct was to flare brighter, to push back with overwhelming force. But she remembered Kara's words, calm, certainty, control, and instead held steady. Let her flames absorb the pressure, without responding to it. The golden flames retreated. Excellent, Kara said, pride in her voice. You learn fast. They train for hours. Kara teaching her how to extend her power without overwhelming others. How to give commands that guided rather than controlled. How to sense other wolves' emotions and respond appropriately rather than reactively. And slowly, Abigail began to understand. Her power wasn't a weapon. It was a tool. And like any tool, it could be used to build or destroy depending on the hand that wielded it. She didn't have to be afraid of herself. She just had to be responsible. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, King Roman sat in his private study, staring at the intelligence reports scattered across his desk. All of them painted the same picture. The pureblood and his son had vanished.
No trace.
No trail. It was like they'd been swallowed by the wilderness itself. We've searched every known territory, Commander Liam reported, his voice tired. Questioned every pack within 100 miles. No one's seen them, Your Majesty. It's like they've disappeared completely. They're being hidden, Roman said flatly. Someone's giving them sanctuary. The sanctuary village, Elder Theo suggested from his place by the fire. It's the only settlement remote enough and independent enough to harbor fugitives without fear of reprisal. Then send a team. I wouldn't recommend that, Theo interrupted gently. The sanctuary is neutral ground. Has been for decades. If we violate that neutrality, we'll turn every outcast and independent wolf in the territories against us. We'd start a war we cannot win. Roman's hands clenched into fists. Then what do you suggest? We just let them go? Let my son live as a fugitive with a pure blood who could destroy kingdoms. I suggest, Theo said carefully, that we consider the possibility that we're wrong. Silence fell like a hammer. Wrong about what? Roman demanded. About purebloods. About the threat they pose. Theo stood, his old bones creaking. I've been studying the ancient texts, Roman. The real histories, not the sanitized versions written after the purge. And you know what I found? The purebloods weren't eliminated because they were evil or dangerous. They were eliminated because they had the power to challenge Alpha authority, to say no when Alphas gave commands, to protect Omegas from force bonds and abuse. They were killed because they threatened the power structure, not because they threatened lives. That's the truth, Theo interrupted. Uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. We eliminated them to consolidate power. And we've been paying for that mistake ever since, with endless wars, rigid hierarchies, and a system that causes more suffering than it prevents. Roman stared at the elder, something like horror dawning in his eyes. Are you saying the purge was wrong? I'm saying, Theo replied quietly, that maybe your son is smarter than we gave him credit for. Maybe he saw something in that girl that we're too blind to see. And maybe, just maybe, instead of hunting them, we should be asking ourselves why they ran in the first place. The king had no answer to that. Back at the sanctuary, Abigail's training continued for 2 weeks. Each day, she grew stronger, more confident, more certain. And each night, she fell asleep in Author's arms, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. On the 15th day, Kara declared her ready. You've learned control, the elder said, pride shining in her ancient eyes. You've learned to wield your power with wisdom rather than force. You're not the frightened girl who arrived here, Abigail. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Which is? Abigail asked. A leader.
Karasmail.
Whether you claim a throne or not, whether you rule a kingdom or just live freely with your mate, you're a leader now. Someone others will look to. Someone who can change the world if she chooses. That night, Abigail and Author sat by the stream that ran through the village, watching the moon rise. What do you want to do? Author asked quietly. Now that you've learned to control your power, now that we're safe, at least for the moment, do you want to stay here? Build a life away from everything? Abigail considered the question. A month ago, all she'd wanted was to be invisible, to survive,
To hide.
but she wasn't that person anymore. I want to fix it, she said finally. The system that tried to destroy me. The laws that say purebloods must die. The hierarchies that treat Omegas like property and give Alphas absolute power. I want to change it, Author. Not through violence or force, but by proving that another way is possible. Author's amber eyes glowed with love and pride. Then that's what we'll do. Together. Together, Abigail agreed, turning to face him fully. But that means going back eventually. Facing your father. Challenging the law. It won't be safe. Nothing about loving you has been safe, Author interrupted, cupping her face. And I wouldn't change a single moment. You're my mate, my partner. And wherever you lead, I follow. She kissed him, deep and meaningful and full of promise. And when they broke apart, both their marks glowed brightly in the moonlight, a reminder of the unbreakable bond between them. We'll need allies, Abigail said practically. Support from other packs. Wolves who believe in our vision. We'll find them, Author assured her. Starting here. The sanctuary wolves trust you now. They've seen your power and your kindness. They'll be our foundation. It wasn't much. A small village of outcasts against kingdoms that had stood for centuries. But it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you need to change the world. One brave choice. One unbreakable bond. One silver flame daughter refusing to hide anymore. Things are about to get epic. Comment your predictions and hit subscribe because this part is the climax you've been waiting for. The summons came on the night of the harvest moon. A messenger arrived at the sanctuary, not a royal guard, but a young beta woman named Hannah who'd served in the palace kitchens. She was travel-worn and frightened, but determined as she delivered her message directly to Author. The king requests a formal meeting, Hannah said, her voice shaking slightly. In 3 days' time, at the neutral ground of the old temple ruins. He promises safe passage for both you and Abigail.
No guards. No tricks.
Just a conversation. Father to son. Author's expression was skeptical. And why should we trust that? Because Elder Theo convinced him, Hannah explained. He showed the king the old histories. The real ones. About the purebloods, about the purge, about everything. And His Majesty is questioning things he never questioned before. He won't say it outright, but I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think he regrets what he tried to do. And he wants to make it right. Abigail and Arthur exchanged a long look, an entire conversation passing between them through the bond. What do you think? Abigail asked silently. I think it could be a trap, Arthur replied honestly. But I also think my father is capable of change. Of admitting when he's wrong. It's rare but possible. Then we go, Abigail decided. Because staying hidden forever isn't living. And if there's even a chance we can end this peacefully, we take it, Arthur finished. He turned to Hannah. Tell my father we accept. 3 days. The old temple. And tell him, his voice softened. Tell him I hope he means what he says. Because I'd like my father back. But if this is a trick, if he's planning to harm my mate, then he'll have to choose between his crown and his son. And he won't like the choice he's forced to make. Hannah nodded and departed, disappearing back into the forest as quietly as she'd arrived. 2 days later, everything went wrong. Abigail was training with Kara when the screaming started. It came from the village center, panicked, terrified screams that sent ice flooding through her veins. She and Kara ran toward the sound, with Arthur and several other village wolves converging from different directions. They reached the center to find chaos. 3 wolves lay on the ground, convulsing, their bodies racked with spasms. Silver foam dripped from their mouths. Their eyes had turned completely black, like someone had poured ink into them. What happened? Arthur demanded, dropping to his knees beside one of the afflicted. I don't know. Nora, one of the village healers, was desperately trying to help, but nothing she did made any difference. They were fine an hour ago, and then they just collapsed. All 3 at once. I've never seen anything like this. Abigail felt it then, a presence. Not physical. Something else. Something old and malevolent pressing against her awareness like oil slicking across her mind. This isn't natural, she said quietly. This is magic. Dark magic. As if her words had been a trigger, one of the afflicted wolves, a young man named Cole, sat bolt upright. His black eyes fixed on Abigail, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice that emerged. The daughter of Silver Flame. Finally. We have waited so long. The voice was layered, dozens of voices speaking as one, male and female, and something else entirely. Ancient and hungry and wrong. Who are you? Abigail demanded, silver flames already gathering in her hands. We are the forgotten, the thing wearing Cole's body said. The ones your ancestors bound beneath the temple. The darkness they couldn't destroy, only imprison. And your power, your beautiful, blazing power, has finally weakened our chains enough for us to reach through the veil. Horror crawled up Abigail's spine. I didn't mean to. We know. But intention matters little. The result is the same. Cole's body smiled, the expression grotesque and inhuman. We will be free soon. And when we are, we will teach all wolves what happens when they try to cage what should never be contained. Starting with this pathetic village of outcasts. The 3 afflicted wolves began to convulse more violently, black veins spreading across their skin like infection. They're dying, Nora said, her voice breaking. The possession is killing them. Not if I stop it, Abigail said, her decision instant and absolute. Abigail, no. Arthur grabbed her arm. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know that 3 people are dying because I accidentally weakened ancient wards. She met his eyes, her expression fierce. I caused this. I'll fix it. Before he could protest further, Abigail placed her hands on Cole's chest and pushed. Not with physical strength. With her power. With her will. Diving into his consciousness, following the black threads of possession back to their source, determined to sever the connection before it killed him. What she found was nightmare made manifest. Inside Cole's mind, Abigail stood in darkness. Not absence of light. This was active darkness, hungry darkness, the kind that devoured hope and warmth and life itself. And in that darkness, shapes moved.
Dozens of them.
Hundreds. Ancient spirits or demons or something worse, all chained together, all burning with rage and hunger. Little pureblood, they whispered in unison. Come to join us? I've come to free them, Abigail said, her silver flames providing the only light in the void. The wolves you're possessing, let them go. Why would we do that? They're our doorway, our connection to the living world. Through them, we can finally escape our prison. Then I'll cut the connection myself. Abigail, as hands blazed brighter. Try, the Forgotten hissed. But know this, we were bound by pure bloods. A dozen of your ancestors working together could barely contain us. What makes you think one girl, untrained and frightened, can do what they could not? Because I'm not trying to contain you, Abigail said calmly, finally understanding what needed to be done. I'm trying to free you. The darkness rippled with confusion. You were bound unjustly, Abigail continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Imprisoned instead of destroyed because the old purebloods couldn't bear to kill you completely. But being caged for centuries, that's worse than death. It's torture. And I won't perpetuate that. You would release us? The voices were skeptical. Knowing what we are, knowing what we'll do. I'll release you, Abigail confirmed. But not into this world. Into the next. Into the death you were denied centuries ago. You don't want to live, forgotten. You want to rest. To stop hurting. To stop being rage and hunger and nothing else. So let me give you that. Let me give you peace. The darkness went completely still. Then, slowly, one of the shapes drifted forward. It looked almost human, almost wolf, but transparent and broken. Peace, it whispered, and the word was so full of longing that Abigail's heart cracked. We had forgotten what that word meant. Then remember, Abigail said gently, and let go. She reached out with her power, not to cage or control, but to guide. To show these tortured spirits the path they'd been denied for so long. The silver flames transformed, becoming soft and warm, illuminating a doorway that hadn't existed moments before. Beyond it, Abigail couldn't see clearly, but she felt warmth.
Light.
The promise of rest after centuries of pain. One by one, the forgotten drifted toward the doorway. Some hesitated. Some rushed forward eagerly. And some paused to look at Abigail, their expressions, if spirits could have expressions, full of gratitude. Thank you, they whispered. Daughter of Flame. Thank you for seeing us. For understanding. Rest now, Abigail said, tears streaming down her face. You've earned it. The last spirit passed through the doorway, and it sealed behind them. The darkness finally, truly empty. Abigail gasped as she was pulled back to her own body. She collapsed immediately, caught by Arthur before she could hit the ground. Around them, the three afflicted wolves stirred, their eyes clearing, the black veins fading. They were alive.
Whole. Free.
What did you do? Kara asked, awe coloring her voice. I freed them, Abigail said tiredly. The Forgotten. They were spirits trapped by old magic, tormented and twisted by centuries of imprisonment. They didn't want to hurt anyone. They just wanted to stop hurting. So you gave them peace instead of destruction, Kara said slowly. Child, do you understand what you just did? The kind of power that requires? The wisdom. Abigail shook her head. I just did what felt right. Exactly. Kara smiled, fierce and proud. That's what makes you different from those who came before. You don't just have power, Abigail. You have compassion. And that is what will change everything. The meeting at the old temple happened the next day. King Roman arrived alone, as promised, though Abigail could sense guards positioned in the surrounding forest. Not close enough to interfere, but close enough to respond if needed. She didn't mention them. She understood a king's caution. Father and son faced each other across the ruins, years of history and hurt between them. "Author," Roman began, his voice carefully controlled. "You're well?" "I'm alive," Author replied coolly. "Which is more than I'd be, if your guards had succeeded in capturing us." Roman flinched. "I was wrong. About many things. Elder Theo showed me the true histories and I—" He paused, something like shame crossing his features. "I've spent my entire reign enforcing laws I never questioned. Laws written by fearful men who prioritized power over justice. And when confronted with proof that those laws might be wrong, my first instinct was to double down rather than reconsider. Because admitting you were wrong would mean admitting you've been hurting people," Abigail said quietly, stepping forward. "Omegas forced into bonds. Purebloods hunted to extinction. Wolves who didn't fit your hierarchy exiled or killed. It's easier to call them threats than to acknowledge the system is broken." Roman's gaze shifted to her, and she saw genuine remorse in his eyes.
Yes.
"And for that, I am sorry. More sorry than words can express. You were a child. You should have been protected, treasured. Instead, we made you a criminal for the crime of existing." "So what now?" Author demanded. "Apologies are nice, but they don't change the fact that there's still a law calling for my mate's execution." "Then we change the law." Roman's words hung in the air like a vow. "I am king. I can repeal the anti-pureblood legislation. I can officially pardon Abigail and restore your status as crown prince. I can begin to dismantle the systems that caused this harm in the first place." "Just like that?" Abigail asked skeptically. "You'd overturn centuries of law." "Not easily," Roman admitted. "There will be resistance from traditional alphas, from packs who benefit from the current power structure."
"But yes."
"Because it's the right thing to do. Because my son loves you. And because—" He paused, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I would very much like to meet my future daughter-in-law properly. Without guards or threats or fear. Just as family." Author looked at Abigail, silently asking her opinion. She studied King Roman carefully, looked for deception, for hidden angles, for any sign that this was manipulation. But all she found was a man who'd made terrible mistakes and genuinely wanted to fix them. "Okay," she said finally. "But this doesn't end with just changing the law. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No more Omegas forced into bonds. No more rigid hierarchies that crush anyone who doesn't fit. We rebuild the system from the ground up, creating something that actually serves all wolves, not just alphas." "That's a tall order," Roman said, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "Good thing you've got a pureblood and a prince to help," Abigail shot back. "And apparently my son found himself a queen," Roman said, the smile growing. "Even without a crown." Author laughed, surprised and delighted, and pulled Abigail against his side. "Told you that you were magnificent. You're both insufferable," Abigail muttered, but she was smiling too. The change didn't happen overnight. It took months of negotiations, compromises, and carefully orchestrated reforms. But slowly, steadily, the kingdom began to transform. The anti-pureblood laws were repealed. Omegas were given legal protections and the right to refuse bonds. The sanctuary village was officially recognized and protected. And Abigail, the last pureblood, the Silver Flame daughter, the girl who'd been hunted and caged, became an advisor to the throne. Not a queen, despite Roman's teasing. She didn't want to rule. But she wanted to help, to use her power and her perspective to make sure no one else had to suffer the way she had. And Author stood beside her through all of it. Her mate. Her partner. Her constant. 6 months after the meeting at the old temple, news arrived that Alpha Zane had been challenged by his own beta and defeated. The North Mountain Pack, under new leadership, sent a formal apology for the attack and requested a peace treaty. Abigail granted it. With conditions. "This is amazing," Author said one evening as they reviewed the latest reports in their shared chambers. 3 more packs have requested to adopt our reforms. 4 territories have reached out about trade agreements. You're changing the entire werewolf world, love. We're changing it, Abigail corrected, setting down the documents and moving to sit in his lap. I couldn't do this without you. You could, Arthur argued, his arms wrapping around her waist. You're strong enough to do anything, but I'm grateful you choose to do it with me. She kissed him, slow and sweet and full of love. Always with you. That's the deal. Forever, he agreed. Their marks glowed in perfect synchronization, gold and silver intertwined, a visible representation of their unbreakable bond. Outside their window, the kingdom was changing, growing, becoming something better than it had been. And at the center of it all, a pureblood Omega and her Alpha Prince were proving that love could transform the world. 2 years after Abigail's awakening, the Harvest Moon Festival was different this year. For the first time in centuries, it wasn't just a display of dominance and pack hierarchy. It was a celebration of unity, of change, of the new world they'd built together. Abigail stood on the balcony of the palace, watching as wolves from dozens of territories gathered in the courtyard below. Alphas mingled freely with Omegas. Betas laughed with pureblood descendants who'd emerged from hiding once the laws changed. And children, so many children, played without fear, growing up in a world that valued them for who they were rather than what rank they'd been born to. You're thinking too much, Arthur said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. I can feel it through the bond. What's going on in that brilliant mind? I'm thinking about how different things are now, Abigail said, leaning back against his chest. 2 years ago, I was terrified of being discovered, of what my power meant. And now, she gestured to the festival below. Now I'm watching a world transform because we refuse to hide. Because you refuse to hide, Arthur corrected. I just followed your lead. We did it together. She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. Everything. Together. He kissed her forehead, her nose, finally her lips. And we're not done yet. There's still so much to build, so many wolves who need our help. But tonight, Abigail interrupted, tonight we celebrate. We've earned that, don't you think? We've earned everything, Arthur said fiercely. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. A knock on the door interrupted them. Elder Theo entered, his ancient face creased with a smile. Sorry to interrupt, but the ceremony is about to begin. Are you two ready? Ready as we'll ever be, Abigail said, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. Tonight wasn't just a festival. It was a coronation. Not for a king and queen. Roman was still healthy and ruling well. But for the official titles they'd created together, Alpha Prince and Pureblood Advisor, co-leaders of the reform movement, representatives of the new way forward. They walked together through the palace halls, past tapestries that now included images of purebloods alongside traditional pack symbols, past guards who bowed respectfully rather than fearfully. Everything had changed, and it was still changing, evolving, growing. The grand hall was packed. Every territory had sent representatives. Every pack had someone in attendance. And as Abigail and Arthur entered, the crowd erupted into applause. King Roman stood at the center of the dais, his expression proud. My wolves, he began, his voice carrying across the massive space. 2 years ago, I nearly made the greatest mistake of my reign. I nearly destroyed what the moon goddess herself had blessed. But my son, he looked at Arthur with pure fatherly love. My son was braver than I was. He saw the truth when I was blind. And the woman at his side. His gaze shifted to Abigail. She proved that power coupled with wisdom and compassion can heal what violence never could. He gestured for them to approach. Tonight, we formalize what has already become truth. That these two are not just mates, but leaders. Guides for our people as we navigate this new era. Arthur, Abigail, kneel. They knelt together, their hands intertwined. Roman placed his hands on both their heads. By the authority vested in me as king, by the blessing of the moon goddess, and by the will of our people, I name you co-leaders of the reform. May your bond remain unbreakable. May your wisdom guide us all. And may your love remind us that strength is nothing without kindness. Silver and gold light erupted from where Roman's hands touched them, not his power, but the goddesses, blessing this union and this purpose. When they stood, Abigail's hair glowed like starlight and Arthur's eyes blazed pure gold. Their marks shone so brightly that everyone in the hall could see them, even from a distance. The crowd roared approval. Later that night, after the ceremony and the feasting, Abigail and Arthur slipped away from the celebration, needing quiet after hours of being the center of attention. They walked through the palace gardens, following familiar paths to a spot that had become their sanctuary, a small grove where moonlight filtered through the leaves and created patterns on the ground. "How do you feel?" Arthur asked, pulling her down to sit beside him on the soft grass. "Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified I'll mess it up." Abigail laughed shakily. "All of the above. You won't mess it up." His confidence was absolute. "You know why? Because you care. Because every decision you make comes from a place of wanting to help, to heal, to make things better. That's not something you can fake or force. It's who you are." "I'm still figuring out who I am," Abigail admitted. "There are days I feel like that scared girl hiding in the servants' quarters. And other days." She held up her hand, silver flames dancing across her fingers without conscious thought. "Other days I feel like I could change the entire world." "You already have," Arthur said simply. "Look around, Abigail. Look at what we've built. Omegas have rights now. Purebloods are protected. Wolves who don't fit the traditional mold have sanctuary. Children are growing up knowing they're valued regardless of their rank. That's you. That's what you've given the world." Tears streamed down her face. "What I've given? Arthur, you gave up your comfortable life for me. You walked away from everything." "I walked away from a crown I didn't want and a system I didn't believe in," he interrupted gently. "And I walked toward you. Toward love. Toward purpose. Toward the kind of life I'd only dreamed about. You didn't take anything from me, Abigail. You gave me everything." She kissed him then, pouring all her love, all her gratitude, all her absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be into that single moment. When they broke apart, both breathless, Arthur's expression turned mischievous. "So, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." "Oh." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Depends." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "On how you feel about making this even more official." Abigail's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone that seemed to glow with both silver and gold light. "We're already bonded," Arthur said, his voice soft. "By wolf law, by the goddess's blessing, by every measure that matters. But I want the human tradition too. I want to stand in front of everyone and say out loud that you're my partner in all things. My mate. My love. My wife. So, Abigail of the Pureblood line, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said immediately, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made specifically for her. Which, knowing Arthur, it probably had been. They sat in the moonlight, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for their future. For the wedding. For the reforms they'd continue to implement. For the family they might have someday. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met?" Abigail asked eventually. "Every day," Arthur admitted. "And every day, I'm grateful to the goddess that I found you. That you found me. That somehow, against all odds, we ended up here. Together," Abigail said, the word that had become their promise, their vow, their absolute truth. "Together," Arthur echoed. "Always." Above them, the moon shone silver-white, the same color as Abigail's flames, the same color as her hair, the blessing of the goddess herself. And in that moment, everything was perfect. The nursery was chaos in the best possible way. 3-year-old Luna was demonstrating her newly developed ability to make small silver flames appear in her palms, much to the delight and slight concern of her younger brother Roman, who at 18 months was still figuring out the basics of walking, let alone magic. "Mama, look," Luna said proudly, showing off her flames. "I did it by myself." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Abigail said, carefully extinguishing the flames before Luna could accidentally set something on fire. "But remember, we only use our special fire when an adult is watching, right?" "Right," Luna agreed cheerfully, already distracted by something else. Arthur appeared in the doorway, holding their youngest, 6-month-old Ellie, who was currently trying to eat his shirt. "I think someone's hungry." Abigail took Ellie gratefully, settling into the rocking chair to feed her while Arthur wrangled the older two into something resembling order. This was their life now, chaotic, loud, full in ways Abigail had never imagined possible. They still worked on reforms, still advised the king, though Roman was talking more and more about officially retiring and letting Arthur take the throne. Still helped wolves across the territories navigate the new systems they'd implemented. But they also had this: family, home, the simple joy of raising children in a world where they'd never have to hide what they were. "You're thinking again," Arthur said, settling beside her with Luna on his lap and Roman playing with blocks at his feet. "Just thinking about how lucky we are," Abigail said softly. "How different things could have been." "But they're not," Arthur said, pressing a kiss to her temple.
"They're exactly as they should be."
"Hard one. Precious. Perfect." Luna looked up at her parents with her father's amber eyes and her mother's white hair. "Tell us the story again, about how you and Mama met." "Again?" Arthur groaned playfully. "We've told you that story 100 times. But it's the best story."
Luna insisted.
"Mama was the last pureblood, and Papa was a prince, and they fell in love even though everyone said they couldn't, and then they changed the whole world." "When you put it that way," Abigail laughed, "it does sound pretty good." So Arthur told a story again, edited for young ears, focusing on the romance and the adventure rather than the danger and the fear. And as he spoke, Abigail looked around at their family, at the life they'd built, at the world they'd changed together. She'd started as a secret, a girl too dangerous to exist, and she'd become a symbol, a leader, a mother. But most importantly, she'd become herself. Fully, completely, without apology. And she'd found someone who loved every part of her. "The end," Arthur finished, looking at Abigail with eyes full of love. "And they lived happily ever after." "Not the end," Luna corrected seriously. "Because you're still alive. So it's to be continued." Abigail laughed, pulling her daughter close. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. To be continued. For a very long time." And as the family settled in for the evening, children playing, parents watching, love filling every corner of the room, Abigail knew with absolute certainty. She had found her happily ever after. Not in a crown or a kingdom or perfect circumstances, but in the man who'd chosen her when no one else would. In the children they were raising in freedom. In the world they'd transformed through love and courage. And in the knowledge that no matter what came next, they would face it the way they'd faced everything, together. Thank you for reading Abigail and Arthur's story. If you love this journey, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, addictive werewolf romance stories. Until next time, beautiful souls, may you all find your own happily ever after.